You're listening to the Real Estate Runway podcast, powered by Quattro Capital, where we are all about alternative business and investment strategies to help you amplify life and maximize wealth. Here's your host, the recovering engineer turned multifamily investor, Chad Sutton.
Hello, Real Estate Runway listeners. I'm super excited for you to hear our episode today with Kevin Gardner of Multifamily Utility Solutions. This is a longtime business colleague of mine. We've worked together on a couple of projects in the multifamily space. He really specializes in helping you negotiate, beneficial terms with the cable companies. And, we always focus on the rental revenue stream, but there are other revenue streams you can look for in an apartment complex. And I'm really excited for you to learn how to do that. So without further ado, here we go. All right. Welcome to another episode of the Real Estate Runway podcast. I'm joined with a very esteemed colleague in the industry, Mr. Kevin Gardner of Multifamily Utility Solutions. This guy has decades of experience negotiating multifamily property access agreements on behalf of owners for, with the cable companies and the conglomerates that can really benefit you and help to add to your NOI. His client base, or their company's client base, tripled in the year 2020. And in December alone, if I'm reading this right, Kevin, you generated close to $1 million in receivables, 1 million for your clients. That is just incredible. Kevin, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Chad. Thanks so much, man. I appreciate you offering to have me on your show.
Absolutely. Well, Kevin, I'd love to get into this and first hear a little bit about you and kind of how you came into this business, what your background is, and then maybe we talk about some juicy topics here, because I know that's what everyone's trying to do, is juice that NOI.
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds great. So I started, believe it or not, I started in door-to-door sales, selling cable door-to-door. And I just, I liked the industry. And I gradually just kind of migrated up the ladder in corporate America. I worked for Comcast, became a sales manager, and then a sales and marketing manager. And as I went up the ladder, I got exposed to other parts of the business, and one of those was what at Comcast at that time called commercial development. And when I was the vice president of sales and marketing for the Midwest division, that portion of the business fell under my umbrella. So we really got into it. We dug into it and learned a lot about it, and was very intrigued by that part of the business. I learned a lot, and Comcast was a great company, and they got so big so fast that, I don't know, I love the entrepreneurial stuff myself. And so myself and a couple of colleagues decided to start our own company. And Comcast and Spectrum Charter were two of our first clients, because they hired us to represent them as a third party in the negotiations with property owners to do these deals. Couple years into it, they kind of pulled the plug on us because they wanted to take that in-house. They wanted to have their own personal employees doing it. There was a big push towards, not using contractors and third-party companies, but rather using in-house employees. And we're like, all right, well, what do we do now? Easy. Let's just slide to the other side of the table, right? We know this business inside and out. I think that gives us a pretty unique background, is that, we used to be on the other side of the table from the property owners, and now we're working for the property owners. So we understand what's possible and why certain things are the way they are. And I think that knowledge is helpful, because, quite frankly, doing deals is part of what we do, but education is an even bigger part of what we do.
That is incredible. And I just learned something about you, Kevin. I did not realize that you were on the other side of the table. So what was that like? Let's go back to that time, and before we talk about how this kind of manifests itself today. What was that like, negotiating against owners at that time? I'm assuming there may not have been companies like you around at the time. So were you negotiating with owners directly? Were you negotiating with legal representation of owners? Like, how did that look at that time?
Yeah, we negotiated directly with owners probably 95% of the time. And we would reach out to owners who, quite frankly, didn't even realize that there was an opportunity. But the advantage to the cable company is if you get the property under contract, and you have that asset, and you are going to be in there, and you're going to be able to market your services, and it's like the market in this changes just like the market in multifamily changes, right? There's peaks and there's valleys, and this changes somewhat as well. Sometimes the cable companies are more likely to give you compensation. Depends on your market, and it depends on, are there competitive threats right now, or have they kind of like pulled back a little bit? We've seen folks like Google make big announcements that they're going to get into the fiber business and build all these, and they've built it out a couple places, and they didn't quite get the return on their investment that they thought they might get. So they pulled back, and they haven't really been as aggressive. Some of the phone companies are launching 1G service in some markets. Those are more competitive than others. In some markets, like Knoxville, Tennessee, there's overbuilders, what we call overbuilders, companies like WOW, which basically there are then two cable companies to choose from. It's just been a lot of back and forth, and the industry, it's a little bit of a pendulum. Sometimes the pendulums are kind of in our favor, and other times it's in the cable company's favor. But we learned a lot, and there was a great opportunities to see what the owners were going through, because a lot of them just didn't realize that this was even an option for them.
I love that you ended on that point. That's kind of the next place I'd like to take this is, help us understand, I mean, you followed us for, several years now. We at one time only owned small properties. And I know there's kind of a threshold where you get certain incentives offered to you, but for those let's not assume anyone understands that one can actually negotiate with a cable internet service provider, an access agreement, and get tangible benefits from that. So what does that look like today, and what kind of benefits are we even talking about?
Yeah, so it's a negotiation, and what's the most important thing in a negotiation? Leverage. Right? So if you have larger properties in more competitive markets where there's other options, you have more leverage. If you have a small property, and when I say small, normally the cable companies don't even need an agreement for anything less than 20 units. So if you're right around that 20 to 30 level, and you're in a non-competitive, maybe rural market, there's just not a lot of leverage. So in some cases, they will just say, you know what, we're kind of the only game in town, and you've got, we've got a handful of customers on your property. So, we're really not interested in negotiating for anything. If you've got other options, go explore them. Whereas if you get into a more competitive marketplace, and you've got a couple hundred unit property where they've got a considerable number of customers, then that there's more leverage there. So I love talking to people who are new to the industry, because I'll never forget this. I've been working with one group that does education for now going on 4 years. And the very first meeting they had, conference they had, I went and I talked to a guy for probably half an hour, 45 minutes, just educating him on this process. And at that time, he had, I think, 3 or 4 duplexes. And we obviously couldn't help him at that point. But who was the first guy I saw when I walked through the door the next year? It was this guy. And he, at that point, came up to me and said, next week, I'm closing on a 65 unit property, and you're one on the top of my list to call, right? Since that time, that was 2 years ago, this guy now has over 800 units. So, that to me is exciting, because we took the time to educate him. Who knows? He may have ended up his career with a couple duplexes, and that's it. And that's okay. But, it was cool to educate him and share with him, and now, now we're doing a lot more business because he's got a lot more leverage.
Right.
and
Right.
in a competitive market. So yeah, it's been great.
Yeah. And you never know which one of those leads are going to, become someone who you can really help each other in the next life, right? I mean, if you've got 4 duplexes now, maybe you can't really help, but now that he's aware of this, this is another value play this individual knows how to spot when acquiring properties.
Yeah.
So for those who don't really know kind of what the perks of these can be, and I know they've kind of changed over time. I mean, there was a time where there was big money in this for everybody, right? In terms of signing bonuses and such. But let's say you own a 150 unit building, or even 300 units, right? 250 unit buildings, or you're a managing partner on them, one of the two. What can, let's say you're in a market where there are more than, like a Chattanooga, Tennessee, there's, EPB and Comcast in town. What types of terms would you expect to be starting to negotiate? Like, what is even what is market? What is even typically on the table in terms of perks or benefits that one might expect to go after?
Oh, Chad, I hate when people ask me for specific numbers because, then they start penciling them in and all that sort of things. And,
Well, we can talk
uh,
qualitative. It doesn't have to be quantitative. But like,
yeah,
are we talking about, is it just an upfront fee? Is it, do they get sort of, ways to offer internet directly to their tenants, on their dollar and market it? Like, I'm trying to figure out why would I as an owner say, yeah, I'd like to talk to a cable company and see how we can help each other?
I got you. Yeah. So there's 2 different types of agreements. There is one which is called ROE, or right of entry. And what a lot of people don't realize is, let's say Chattanooga, right? So let's say you're the incumbent cable operator there, Comcast, and you've got a franchise to operate in the city of Chattanooga. All that does is it gives you the right to be in the public easements, the public rights of ways. That's all it does. And for that, you pay a fee to the city of Chattanooga. Now, let's say you own a home there and you say to Comcast, I want to be your customer. You are then granting them the right, when you sign that work order, to be on your personal property, because they don't have that through their franchise, because it's your personal property. Take that to the multifamily space, and it's different, right? If I'm renting an apartment from you and I want to be the customer of Comcast, I can't give them the right to be on your property. You have to give them the right to be on your property. And because that's the case, you're kind of the gatekeeper there. So they need your permission, right of entry, to be on your property to serve me, who is the customer. And that has value. That can be one of 2 ways that you can be compensated for that, and sometimes both. The first is in exchange for signing an agreement to allow them to be on your property, you can get what's called a door fee, oftentimes in the industry, or a signing bonus. And that's a lump sum amount that's paid up front, usually within 90 days of execution of the agreement. The other portion that you could get is what's called revenue share. And exactly what it sounds like. It's a commission. It's an ongoing percentage of the revenue based on a sliding scale, typically, that encourages you to market their service to new people moving in. And you want them to they are saying, look, the better you can do for us, the better we do, the more we're going to pay you. And it's usually a sliding scale. So that's what happens in the right of entry. The good part about that is you have limited liability. You don't have to pay anything. You're just granting the rights, and you can get money up front for that. The other is what's called a bulk arrangement. And what you do there is you buy the service for every one of your residents, and it's basically becomes an amenity, right? I mean, we've talked about this before because it's something that, you're considering right now for one of the properties.
That's right. Yeah.
And, depending on the market, depending on the, does the guy next to me offer this? And is it almost like I have to do this to stay competitive with the guy next door? And then, what kind of property do I have? Will my residents value this? So you buy this in bulk. Now, the challenge here is, and then you can add it to your rent. Let's say your rent's $500 and you buy cable service, internet service for $25, and you raise your rent to $550. In theory, you're making $25 per unit per month off that service. But here's the but. You are obligated. You have that liability now. That is yours. You pay for every unit in the property, regardless of whether or not the resident wants it, regardless of whether or not the unit is occupied. So sometimes, especially when I'm talking to people that are just buying a property that is something that they're gonna work on, and they're gonna have to, as units are vacant, they're gonna have to fix them up and bring them up and all that kind of stuff. It's not that bulk is a bad idea for them, but the timing may not be right for them. So maybe it's like we're actually doing this with a property in Kentucky right now. They just bought it, and it's one of those that they're going to have to put a lot of time and effort in, and there's going to be a decent amount of vacancies for a while. We made an arrangement for 2 years to do right of entry, and then we'll convert that over to a bulk in the future. At least that's the plan right now. So the other thing to keep in mind is cable companies prefer bulk. One bill, one customer, fewer truck rolls, fewer phone calls, all that kind of stuff. So if you do right of entry and you decide later that you want to go to bulk, there's a likelihood that they would be willing to do that. Whereas if you go bulk and say, you know what, this isn't quite working out for me, and you want to go back to right of entry, that's not likely to happen because they've got you where they prefer you to be. I'm not saying that they're unreasonable business people or anything like that, but in business, if you've got the objective that you want and the favored contract that you want, you're not likely to go back and say, yeah, we'll be good guys and we'll just forget about it.
Sure. And it goes back to leverage, right? I mean, you might be able to do that if you have 4 other bulk contracts with them, but that makes perfect sense. When there's friction in a business, that business applies oil to make it a well-oiled machine, right? And so one of those things is high volume of phone calls, high volume of touch time for the same amount of revenue. If you can change that to one touch point for the same revenue, your overhead per dollar revenue just went through the roof, right?
Yeah.
So that's a really good thing. Yeah.
It's not necessarily the exact same amount of revenue. It
could be lower, I guess, with the bulk.
It's fixed because if they're giving you a 50% discount and they have 60% customers in there, they're maybe getting a little bit of less revenue, but the operational cost savings is making it a more profitable long-term value for them.
That makes sense. So just to summarize, that's a very interesting thing to think about. And I'm being a little selfish here because we're kind of talking business and we're kind of doing a podcast,
right?
On the building that we're talking about, which is probably going to be figure a 18 to 24 month value add play, right? Or value play. We're not going to drive high vacancy and it is full, but it could be a situation where perhaps we want to, get in with a right of entry, and maybe there's some upfront cash on that end, maybe not, depends on the competition, but that at least gets them to have right to work in the building. And then when we're ready, we could convert that. And that would effectively, let's say we had a building that was full at this point at the end of year 2, and it's right of entry. So let's say that the residents are all paying $70, right, for cable internet a month. And then, I roll it to a bulk account. And then effectively, let's say they give me that 60% discount. Let's use 50 for round numbers. Now I absorb that and I take $35 per unit, right? That could be another value that you pass on to the residents at that point, and you're actually not paying dollar for dollar. Is that kind of how that works?
Yeah. The other thing we like to do is, and cable companies understand this. You have leases in place, right? And in theory, if you've got a 120 unit property,
right,
in theory, 12 of those are going to expire every month, right?
Sure.
So just to straight line it. So
right,
they know that if you are buying from them, that you may not have the opportunity to recoup that cost immediately. Because if I've got a lease with you and you say to me, hey, we're going to bump that lease amount, but we're going to give you internet service, I may not be amenable to that. Right? Or I may say, I don't want it. Likewise, you don't want to absorb the $25 cost and give me something if my rent's not going up at least enough to cover that. So what we do is, it's called a ramp up period. We negotiate a ramp up period that says, okay, we're not going to be 100% bulk until the end of the first year, a 12-month period. So we can negotiate that piece of it as well if you're in a situation where you can't automatically recover your costs for every one of your units immediately. But no later than 12 months later, you got to be at 100%.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And is there any situation where they would tie that to the number of units that have been turned out? Like, let's say, you look at a lease exposure analysis, right? And maybe, let's say your unit turnover is biased towards the third and fourth quarter, right? Would they look at a curve that kind of matches that in terms of phasing that, or is it kind of straight line?
Yeah. No, if we can provide data that shows lease expiration and put that in there, yes, they would be reasonable about that.
Very interesting. Well, this has been a pretty insightful discussion, and I feel like we deviated from podcast interview to talking business a little bit, but I think that's still a lot of value. So
same thing, right?
Yeah, same thing, exactly. I guess as we come to the end of this discussion, I've asked a couple of questions of things that I know to ask. Is there anything left over that perhaps the operators should be asking that I haven't mentioned yet? I'm very new at this concept as well.
We touched on, a lot of people are questioning. The one thing I think is real valuable that people don't realize is, look, signing these agreements does not have any negative impact on your residents. You aren't kicking other providers out. You're just exclusively marketing on behalf of one over another. You aren't preventing them from getting any other providers, and the cost to your resident doesn't change if you go right of entry, because within, let's say Chattanooga, the rates are the same. They have to be, you can get a promotional rate or something like that if you're a new customer or something like that, but the maximum rate is the same. So they're not going to add a tax or an extra fee on somebody in your building in order to cover their costs that they're paying to you. So this is totally transparent to any of your residents. You're not negatively affecting them.
That's really good to know, because I think, common sense might tell you otherwise. So that's really good to know that really the resident doesn't feel any adversity. They might feel a benefit if all of a sudden they don't have to pay for utilities anymore, but I'm sure you'll make up for that elsewhere, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, and here's the other thing, to keep in mind is, as much as I can help you out and improve your NOI, it will pale in comparison to if you have unnecessary vacancies because of something that we did that caused, one vacancy could probably offset maybe the whole monthly revenue share.
Sure.
And so, we're very well aware of it, that your bread and butter is filling those units with paying residents. So we look to supplement that and help that, and in no way negatively impact that. And, the other thing that I know, Chad, is there's no bad time to engage us in this process. If you're looking at a property, we'll see what we can find out about it for you. And we don't get paid a retainer. We don't get paid an hourly rate. We only get paid if we make money for you. We work on commission only, and we get paid if you get paid. So our goals are aligned. And there's no reason not to call us and ask us questions about any particular property.
I agree 100%. And Kevin and his team have been absolute assets to us, through the process of, even when we were buying smaller properties, just knowing kind of where we could start to see this value. And then right now we're doing tangible trades on, against two companies in a certain market. So it's all very helpful stuff. On that note, Kevin, do you mind giving the listeners, the best method of getting in touch with you? Because based on what you just said, this might be the best time to provide that.
Yeah, no, that's great. Honestly, best to schedule a call and do that via email, because quite frankly, we've gotten really busy lately. Like you said, our December was phenomenal, and I feel bad in some ways, but I also feel good because, despite the fact that, during the COVID period and all that kind of stuff, our business boomed.
That's great.
Because owners were looking for other, with the uncertainty of, can I evict people? Will they be able to pay and all that kind of stuff? They were all looking for additional revenue streams. So we were there and we kept marketing hard and, getting the word out about our service. So, you can try and call me, but, if I'm on another call, it's easier to kind of schedule a call. Give me an email, Kevin@multifamilyutilitysolutions.com. Our website is multifamilyutilitysolutions.com. I thought about doing one of those calendar things, where you like schedule things and all that kind of stuff. But so often, we value the clients we have so much that as things come up throughout the day, I kind of like to keep the day open, because as things come up and their needs come up, I like to be there and be able to respond quickly.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Well, very good. Kevin, let me ask a couple of questions that we ask all of our listeners here, and then we'll, turn you back to taking care of your clients.
All right.
So what is your superpower as it relates to your business?
Superpower. We look for win-win solutions, like the way our commission structure is based, right? We're in it together, and I think that's good. So I don't know, we'll go with that. We understand, how pieces fall together, how one thing may impact another.
Yeah.
And we know, I don't know, I guess I'm giving you a bunch of them, but we network well. So if you are in the multifamily space and you need a contact or a solution for something besides what we do, we will be able to put you in touch with somebody.
I love it. And I might even argue that one of your superpowers is having been on both sides of the table. So you know how to fight fire with fire, if you will. That's a bad analogy for real estate owners, but so Kevin, what is your biggest failure to date and what did it teach you?
When I started my own business, I think I started it too quickly, and I was too dependent on one or two revenue streams or one or two clients. And the one thing I forgot to do was keep doing the things that got me those clients. So I was so focused on those clients that when we lost one of them because they lost one of their clients through no fault of our own, we didn't have that backup. So right now we're very focused on taking care of our existing clients, but doing the things that got us those existing clients, like appearing on podcasts, like yours, and networking. We continue to network and, ask for referrals from our existing clients. And as a result, things keep, going up. We're not solely reliant on any one or two clients now. So that was a tough lesson learned.
That's fantastic.
Diversification of our portfolio.
I hear you. And one thing that Quattro is very passionate about is the philanthropic cause. So are you involved with any philanthropic causes that you'd like us to promote?
You know what? I am. And this is where another thing is, I just believe in total honesty and transparency. Yeah. And I will admit to you that I am somebody in recovery, personal recovery. I am nearly 5 years alcohol free, and I'm proud of that. And my life has gotten so much better. And there's a facility in my community that provides recovery support services for people new to recovery. It's a housing facility called Safe Harbor Norton. And I'm on their board, and I'm actually going over there this afternoon to participate in the cookout with the guys and give them words of encouragement to get them going, because getting started on that journey is very difficult. And so I'm very passionate about continuing to be a part of that and give back to others what was so freely given to me. So there you go. That's total transparency and something that's very near and dear to my heart.
I love it. And where can the listeners find that organization? Do you know the website offhand?
Yeah, it's safeharbornorton.org, I believe is the.
All right, very good.
And they're on Facebook as well. And it's a great facility, and it's kind of a nice little campus area where guys come in and then they graduate from one housing facility to the next as they go, and they're in a safe environment. And like I said, we're going over there. We're going to cook some burgers. We're going to have a group discussion with the guys and just give them some encouragement.
I love it. I love it. Well, Kevin, I really appreciate you coming on the show today. This was tremendous value, if nothing else for me. I mean, this was like one of our general business discussions, but I really hope the listeners can, start to see the possibilities and, like you mentioned, it's multiple revenue streams, whether they are different residents paying rent or, starting to figure out how to fill up that other income bucket as well. So thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Chad. I appreciate it. It's always great chatting with you.
We hope this episode was insightful and brought value to your day. If so, please be awesome and leave us a 5-star review. Find out how Team Quattro can help you at thequattroway.com. Until next time, this is the Real Estate Runway Podcast.